We'll go back to this. Okay, so we're going to talk about supervision, halachic supervision, and we'll speak about what the reason why do we need it and when we need it. And okay, so first of all, what can happen in the lab? We have to think about how can it happen? How can we prevent it from happening? And is it a halachic need? Is it a chumrah? Is it a stringency? What exactly is the deal of it? So we know that I'm sure that Rabbi Siegelman told you last week when he spoke about IVF that there have been some very famous cases of couples ending up with children that are not theirs. This is a case in the 20 years ago in the London Times. Court battles start for white couple with black twins in mix-up. This is a picture from that was in that article from Holland several years before that. This is a book of the Caroline and Sean Savage, who were religious Christians in America a few years ago. And during their pregnancy of IVF, they got a call saying, unfortunately, there was a mix-up in the lab and you're carrying somebody else's baby. And because they were religious Christians, they didn't terminate the pregnancy. They delivered the baby and then they gave it to their biological parents. And she wrote a book about it to speak about their experience. A little bit more current. So this was a few years ago in Czechoslovakia. There was a case, and then even more recently there was a case a couple of years ago in New York with IVF mix-up, and then there was a case very recently in Los Angeles where a couple are suing the lab because they ended up with somebody else's baby, and they think that it was actually malpractice. That's what they're choosing. So what are the processes that happen in which in going into IVF? So you learned this last week, but we have sperm collection, sperm processed, the eggs are retrieved, the eggs are processed, the eggs are fertilized, the embryos are placed in the incubator, the embryos are tested, the embryos are transferred, the embryos are frozen, the embryos are thawed, and the embryos are transferred. So we have a lot of things that are happening. There's a lot of stages, and the more complex a system, obviously, the more likelihood is that there could be a mistake. And from getting to sperm collection to embryo transfer, there's a lot of stages that you learned, and there's a lot of people involved. And so that's the reason why we are concerned that maybe there could be a mistake. There has been a lot of work in the labs to make sure that there's no such mistake. There's embryo GPS. It follows the embryo that every time that you remove a petri dish or anything's moved, there's an alarm that has to be signed off. There's electric eyes. There's lots of things that are going on, which we'll relate to when we speak in a moment about what is the basis of supervision. We'll speak about that because it's not that we think that there's this sort of happy-go-lucky, they're throwing eggs and sperm all over the lab and nobody knows what's going on. There is a tremendous setups and systems in place to make sure that there isn't a mistake. But having said that, there's still mistakes, as we saw before. We saw it throughout the world. It's not only in Israel because they're backward. They don't, it's a third world country to have it. But in America, they have it. It's not true. You see that it's throughout the world there are mistakes, and very, very good labs there are mistakes. With all the setups that they have, but it's not that the mistake happened in a lab because there wasn't as good a system. It's exactly the same system. They're exactly the same, but we're human beings, human error. So here you have, someone sitting in the lab. It's very nice. There's a lot of room. You can see exactly the amount of space we can have to do supervision. Obviously, not every lab is exactly as spacious as this here. You already learned about the process of doing ICSI, or of connecting the sperm and the eggs together. And here we see a range of incubators of minks that are along the side, and they're all, as you see, tapered with colors. However, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of people going on at the same time. There's a lot of things going on, and a lot of sperm and eggs and embryos being moved from place to place, and it is a complex issue. There's also, of course, the whole issue of freezing. When we freeze, we are putting it inside a tube, inside a sleeve that is inside the tank, that is often inside the tank. There are, as you see here, you see that each of these clips is a different canister. So you have inside this tank 10 canisters or 9 canisters. Each of the canisters contains many, many straws, and each of the straws contain many, many embryos. And so, when you're looking at, and here we have it here, this is even more complex, a larger tank, slightly older system, in which we really have a large number of possible mistakes that can happen in that we have tremendous amount of material. So if we know anybody that's dealing with the hospital, anybody that's like Rabbi Wine is a chaplain in the hospital, so he'll tell you that there are mistakes that happen in the hospital. That somebody came in to be operated on, and they operated on the wrong limb, or they operated on the wrong person, those things happen. Here, the chance of things happening are even greater because we really have this tremendously complex system, and lots of people going on that same system at the same time. So if you have a lab that's pretty busy, so they can have 1,500 IVF cycles a year, which means that they're having a lot a day. They're having a tremendous number of big, but there's a lot of things, and there's an overlap. So the 1,500 cycles, of which each one is 5 days long, and so, or 6 days long, or 4 days long, and so we're having a lot of ongoing work. And some in the lab, you only have 5 people at any one time. You can have it in the same lab. You have 30 people that are being treated on, each of them at different stages of their treatment. And so even if we say, well, I'm in a very small lab, and my lab is very careful, still we have other people, couples being treated in the lab. There's other sperm in the lab, there's eggs in the lab, there's embryos in the lab. Anywhere you are, even if you're in a very, very small place, unless you're going in to do an IUI that's happening as you're watching it inside, the little clinic that your doctor's in, this sort of his home sort of kitchen clinic. There's other things going on. There's always other things going on. Even if you're in the clinic, which only does IUIs, there is a possibility that you have a petri dish, or you have a pipette, or you have a syringe that contains material from the last patient that they forgot, that even though the protocol is to change, is to discard the single-use pipette, there was a mistake and we didn't. And we've had those things in which there was a pipette was used twice. Inadvertently, no one noticed it, and the supervisor's there and she can stop it. So we need it. And the other thing is, Rav Borstein, when he first established PUA, he tells a story that he went to Rav Shlomo Zalman, and to talk about what was needed. Rav Shlomo Zalman, you need to have supervision. You need to supervise this treatment. And Rav Borstein said, I don't think so. I've been in the lab. I've been there when it was, and I've seen the way that they're very, very careful, and that they're very, what happened here? They're very careful, and they do not, there's really there's no way that they could be a mistake. And Rav Shlomo Zalman said to him, why do you go there on a Friday, 15 minutes before they're about to close? They close at 2:00. Go there at 1:30 on a Friday. And he came back and said, you need supervision. Because when you have this tremendous pressure and people are tight, people are working, you can have a lab. We were in a lab in Los Angeles that we were there, I think it was 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, they were still working. There was still an embryologist working there. So she could have been there for 12 hours straight working. And that's a long time when you're huddled over a petri dish, making sure you don't make a mistake. There's stress. There's a lot of stress because we want to get it right, and it's this very expensive, commodity that we're dealing with. It's not I made a mistake I didn't understand. I told the Tosfot wrong, or I'm a sofer and I wrote the letter wrong and I can erase it. This is a very expensive procedure that we're going through. So there's a tremendous amount of press. There's a rush to get over. Everybody has their Friday. So in Israel it's Friday. In America could also be Friday. It could be a holiday. It could be. There's always stress, and there's clumsiness. People just make a mistake. We're just clumsy, and there's also human error. And what we really see is that really, with all of the as we said, the setup and the whole system in place to prevent errors happen, because people are still people. The other thing is there's also sometimes similar names. So you can have two couples. We had a couple that they defrosted, thawed out embryos for one couple, and there was another couple in the lab at the same time who had the same last name, and the husband had the same first name. And so they had, and you can have the Rabinovich spell one time with a yud and one time without a yud, and we just make mistakes. It's the same name. So even though we have a number, we don't always check the number. We don't always do that. The other thing is that happens in America. It doesn't happen so much in Israel, but it does happen in America. Is that labs tend to sublet from other labs. So that let's take Los Angeles as an example. It doesn't happen always in everywhere. Los Angeles is a very good example. You have quite a lot of clinics that are using the same labs. There's not that many labs that are actually doing the actual work, the actual behind the scenes work. And so a lot of people will take a private doctor, but don't take a private lab. And so there's the same lab that's dealing with lots of places. So you can say, well, my doctor is I trust my doctor 100%. He's perfectly bona fide. He's a from guy, but he's not his lab, and he's not running the rules of the lab. And the rules of the lab are run by somebody else. And so there's a lab. So there's also that if anybody's ever been to an IVF unit, and hopefully part of the course maybe we'll get to actually go to see one, is that there's two mamlachot. There's the mamlechet, the doctors, and there's the mamlechet, the lab. The mamlecha of the doctor is in charge, and he gives suggestions on how to stimulate the patients and how to treat with the patients. But the lab is often, even though they're in the same, they're not sublet, they're in the same dominion. There's still the lab director decides what's going on in the lab, and doesn't really take too much notice of what's going on with the doctor. We were in a very, very prestigious clinic in New York, and the doctor said, no problem, there should be supervision. You go into the lab, and the lab director says, over my dead body will there be supervision here? So they're not always the same, even though you have a from doctor, you don't always have a from embryologist. Because of that reason, I'm sure you saw this tshuva, or you saw some part of it. It was mentioned. Rav Waldenberg in the Sitz Eliezer, in Chelik Tetvav, it's one of the later Chalakim, says, there's no way to do ashkacha. Why? We take them, we put them into the test tube. The people go home. They're not even there in the lab. It's disappeared from them. There's lots of other people going on. There's lots of other test tubes. And they go into the incubator according to some sort of order that doctors have. וגם שם במבחנה נשארו מספר ימים או שבוע ויותר עד שביצית תעבור במבחנה מספר שלבי התחלקות. And it stays there a long time. It's a long gone process. So it's easy to have, basar samom and ayin is that we have the shechita, and then you have to do malicha, so there's a limited amount of time you have it. Here it can be in the lab for a long time. It can be there for several days. And only later do we put it back into the rechem of the woman. ואם כן, נעלה מכל ספק שבמצב כזה לפנינו בבקעה פתוחה ושדה פרוצה, it's impossible to have any control. פרצה קוראת לגנב, בדמות ובשם רפואה ומדע, לעשות כתוב בעיניו באורך כבשייכה. So says it's Eliezer, the doctors have an interest to improve and to get a better result, better yield, and therefore, malasot, they can do what they want in the lab. הן לפניהם והן אחריהם, ובהשקטת מצפון שפועל ועושה זאת למען קידום ההתפתחות המדע כביכול. Do it in the name of science, in the name of good science. And therefore, וכל השגחה ולא טובה ביותר, לא תהיה הדור הבא בטוחה ב100%. You can never have 100% supervision. שלא יחליפו ולא ימירו זרע אחר במקום זרע זה. That they wouldn't switch. וכן שלא יבואו לאחר מכן להשתיל ביצית וזרע של זוג זה אל תוך רחמה של זוג אחר. They're going to steal the eggs. אישה אחרת פנויה או אשת איש, ותוצרנה על ידי כך בעיות חמורות וקשות. The difficult problems, possible problems בכל שטחי החיים המשפחתיים, אל גווניהם השונים, ותמלא הארץ זימה ונמצא אך נושא את אחותו. So it says this, it's impossible to have ashkacha. Why? Because the doctors have an interest to lie. And because the doctors have an interest to lie, they're going to lie. And because they're going to lie, there's no way that you can have ashkacha of it. If I go to the doctor and the doctor pulls out of his pocket sperm that I didn't see, and I don't see that it happens because he does it surreptitiously, there's actually no way I can have any ashkacha. And the fact is that Rav Eliezer Waldenberg is 100% correct. In a place in which I am concerned that there will be a cheat, that there will be a malicious intent, there's no possible way to do ashkacha. Because once we have a place in which there is malicious intent, the setup the system that is set up to prevent mistakes will not be followed, will not be adhered to. And therefore there'll be hefkerus, 100% correct. There's absolutely no way that I can do hashgacha there. So it's impossible to do hashgacha in a place in which I really think that they're lying. What therefore does hashgacha does come to solve? It doesn't come to solve lying. Someone that's going to cheat you, we see that in kashrut, we see that in every form of where we have some sort of supervision. If someone wants to cheat, them yitzlichu, and the occasional terrible stories that we hear about kashrut proves that if you want to lie, you can lie. There was a case, a few years ago in Monsey where the guy was selling tray for meat mamash, and he sold it as kosher. All the frumitim were buying there. And if you want to lie, you can lie. The question is, does hashgacha come to solve the problem of a place in which I do believe that they're not lying, that just human error? There's this idea that there's human error. That's the question that we'll come to in a moment. So if we look, I just want to show you a little bit, I don't know if you saw these pictures last week, what does supervision mean? So supervision does not mean someone sitting in a room 3 meters away with looking through a small hole. It doesn't mean someone watching a camera. It means you can see, here's the lab, here's the women with the white coat are working, this is Bikur Cholim, and here's the supervisor. She's usually in a lab coat. This is actually, she'd finished work and we brought her back just to take the picture. She was not supervising at the time. But you can see the proximity that she has to the treatment. You can see that she's mamash watching it, hawk-eyed, no possible way that anybody can get anything around her. So the emes dik is that even if there was real malicious intent, ein hashgacha. But even if there was somewhat of an intent, it's impossible to pull over. She's mamash sitting there. There's no way you could do it unless she was in Hutzah. Here we have an IVF. There's also Bikur Cholim. Here you see our supervisor in the green coat. You can see the proximity she has. You can see how close she is. She's part of the tzevet. She's already part of the team. She's already there. There's no separate room that she has. She's there. She's very, very, very present inside the lab, and can watch every single step of the way. Here you can see this is a dedicated tank. It says on it Pu'ah, the top, and here we another stage of supervision. Here we're placing it inside. You can see from this. Here we're putting it inside a sleeve. Inside here is already it's sealed, and when you put it here, when we freeze it, it's already frozen with the sleeve already on. Oh, so that's an excellent question. So the practicalities, right? When it says who's employs her, so she's employed by Pu'ah, not by the lab. So and we've had that in certain places that they said that we don't have anybody in the lab who's not part of the lab. So she had to sort of become to work there, but she was still getting paid by Pu'ah. And she has to get paid. And the reason I want a supervisor to get paid is because it's not a chesed. You're not doing me a favor. This is a job. And it's a job. You can't, and we have a case in which it turns out it's on Shabbat, or it's on Erev Chag, or it's on Purim. And it's on all of these cases we've had, Chol HaMoed, and you have to, it's a job. You have to come, you have to turn up. So we've, it's a job in which she, as I said, is paid by Pu'ah, and she is an employee of Machon Pu'ah. She has to come. She's not an employee of the hospital. Here we see the sleeve that we place. So we place this frozen vials inside the sleeve, and it can be locked there. When we leave it, it has to be locked. It has to be that either she's there present or she's locked it, and she's the only one that's got the key. So there's no possible way it could be tampered with. She placed it inside here. You see there's a sleeve inside the incubator. Here's the supervisor locking up the tank. She's the only one that has the key. So we can see, and we can take more pictures of the way Pu'ah works. You can see it's very, very close. She's, as we said before, paid. She's paid by Pu'ah, and she, when she's not there, locks everything. So there shouldn't be a question that during the night someone came in and broke the seal or some such possibility. What is the basis of hashgacha? Why do we say that we need hashgacha in fertility? Why do we say like any other medicine? I know hashgacha in dentistry. I know hashgacha in someone gets a blood transfusion. I know hashgacha to see their blood transfusion. I don't know why here is it essential that we have hashgacha? Where do we even come up with the idea? So the basis is the idea that the Gemara says of havchana. The Gemara says in Masech Yevamot Daf Mem Aleph says the Mishnah, Yevama lo tachlot lo tidyabeim ad sheyesh la shlosha chodashim. We don't do chalitza or yibum until 3 months. V'chein kol shar nashim. That's the yibum. That's why it appears in the Yevamos. Says the Mishnah in the same way. Every other woman who gets married, a woman gets married, and she was previously married. She was divorced, or she was widowed. Until 3 months have passed from husband A to husband B. You all know the halacha of havchana. Achad betulot, v'achad beulot, achad gegrushot, v'achad almanot, achad nosot, v'achad arusot. Says the Gemara. How do we get to that? What's the idea of havchana? Liot lecha leElohim u'lezarcha acherecha lavchin ben zar'o shel rishon lezar'o shel sheni. There has to be avchana. If we want to be in the Tselem Elohim, so we have the Zari Acharai, that I know who my children are. We have an idea of yichus. I have to make sure that I know the yichus between this child and this child. Who's the father? Is father A or father B? So if it's 3 months apart, and the child is born, even if he's born after 7 months, we know that it couldn't be from the first father, and therefore it must be from the second father. And if we didn't have avchana, if he was born even later, we could say maybe he was born after 9 months. Maybe he was still was a long pregnancy. As the Gemara suggested, there's a possibility of having a longer pregnancy. That's a question whether medically we know such a situation. However, there needs to be a clear distinction to know who the father is. Rav Amar gezerah shemi yisach adachoto me'aviv. Says Rav, why do we need to have that? So we could say it's gezerah takatuv. We need to have avchana. Or we could say no, that it's actually a practical question. What's the practical problem? The practical problem is that I have the question of whether there'll be siblings marrying each other. Because if we can imagine a situation that Yaakov marries Rachel, and Yaakov dies, and Rachel is now pregnant, and she doesn't know about it. It's the beginning of the pregnancy. And she then marries Yitzchak. So Rachel is now married to Yitzchak. And Rachel has a baby. And we don't know whether this child is the son of Yaakov or the son of Yitzchak. And the possibility is she'll say, no, it's Yaakov's son. And then that child will marry Yitzchak's other child, Yitzchak's son from another woman. And so therefore, in order to get away from that idea that maybe siblings will marry each other, we have a havchana. Havchana is there's a distinction between this one and this one. V'yabam Eshet achiv me'imo v'yotziet v'yabem et imo l'shuk v'yiftot imo l'shuk. The Rishut Rizbaz said Chelek Aleph, Mashma d'avchanat azer b'isha ruya leled havemin Torah v'shar nashim kulam gezerah d'Rabbanan. Says the Rizbaz. So if you saw the Mishnah says we don't only have chana in a woman that's ra'uya lolid. What about an older woman? We have the same thing. We have the same din. We have the same avchana. Says the Rizbaz. Therefore, if a woman who's ra'uya led, it's a din Torah. Why? Because not only do we have the gezerah takatu, but also this din of Shem Yisrael Tachoto is an addition to the din of the Torah. However, Shar Nashim, it's only gezerah d'Rabbanan. Maybe it will happen. Maybe there'll be a problem, or there's a gezerah included in the possibility of we want to have avchana between them. And therefore, the Rizbaz says, really, it's a din. Avchana is a din Torah. If a woman is able to have children, it's a din Torah. That's avchana. Rashi says the pasuk, ולזרעך אחריך, says Rashi, שאין השכינה שורה, אלא ודאים, שזרעו מיוחס אחריו, ואך אינם מקיים עליהם בנדרים, ובראתי מכם המורדים הפושעים בי, אלו בני עבוביה. So Rashi says, what does it mean, זרעך אחריך, that we need to know who the zera is? Because it's a mystical idea. The Shechina only comes on someone who we know vadai who they are. We only know if we know who. That it's Yitzhak and Rachel, so that we know who the child is. Therefore, that we have the Shechina. But if we don't know exactly who you are, if you're some sort of shtuki, so the Shechina is not there. How do we know that? This brings in the Gemara Nadarim. The Gemara Nadarim says that there are the Tesha Midot, the inappropriate sexual conduct that leads to children who are problematic. What is it? He says, "Baroti mekem mordim aposhim bi." Ele b'nei ibuvia. One of the Tesha Midot is b'nei ibuvia. B'nei ibuvia is that we don't know a man had relations with his wife, or one of his wives, maybe it's two wives, and he doesn't know whether it's his wife or sister, but doesn't know whether it's this wife or that wife. If it's this wife or her sister, it's still Torah. But if it's this wife or that wife, my mom must have because the idea of b'nei ibuvia, what's b'nei ibuvia? The Shechina isn't on anybody that we don't know exactly who their father and the mother were, and because here b'nei ibuvia, you don't know exactly who the parent is, or there's some sort of sheila of the intent during the sexual intercourse. Therefore, the Rashi says we see that there's a concept of knowing, having a vadaut on who the parents are. So with the Bach says, what about if we don't know? We do it. Is Avchana only the question of getting married? Let's think of another possibility. Matzati bagas says the Beit says the Beit but says the Bach. Matzati bagot asma yashan. מהרבנו פרץ שכתב, אישה נידה יכולה לשכב עד סדיני בעלה. Says the Rabbeinu Peretz. Somebody has their microphone open. Maybe the person has the microphone open. Brickman, I think, microphone is open. One of the it's good. So the Rabbeinu Peretz says a woman who's nida is allowed to lie on the seats of her husband. Maybe it's a question of whether we have there a second. Oh, so Hochman says, I don't understand. What does Rashi say? So again, I think Rashi's idea is that why do we have b'nei ibuvia? If it's this wife or that wife, the idea is we need to have a vadaim. There's a din of vadai. We need to know who husband and wife are. Not only in, I think Rashi's taking it to a sort of a mystical sort of level, that we need to know when we have intercourse, a husband and wife need to be in the moment. They create a vadai child, and not something that's somewhat mubav exactly what his intent was. I think that's the idea. It's something maybe again spiritual that we can't understand necessarily. But I don't understand. Maybe I'm sure if you understand it, but that's the Athenic concept. So it says Rabbeinu Peretz, a woman is allowed to lie on her husband's sheets when she's nida. However, says Rabbeinu Peretz, a woman's not allowed to lie on the sheets of some other man. Why? Because there's a question that maybe she'll get pregnant from the sperm that he ejaculated on those sheets, and therefore, in order to prevent that, she's not allowed. She's allowed to lie on the sheets of her husband when she's nida. However, not on somebody else, not on another man's sheets. Says, so I understand. That's what Rabbeinu Peretz. I don't know if it says the smack. But maybe she can get pregnant when she's nida, or be ben nida. Later ben nida. It's a good question. V'hashiv kevan de'ein kan bia isu avlat kasher legamre. Says the smack. Why is there no issue of the nida? Because there's no bia. There's no bia surah. There's no bia surah. The child is kasher. So then, if that's the case, I feel it to the baby. So then, if that's the case, I think the baby why is the problem with somebody else? Ben Sirah kasheria, because we saw Ben Sirah who was mitaber according to the smack, according to some of the midrashim from Itabab Ambati, from his father Yirmiyahu, who went into the Ambati and ejaculated, and his daughter got pregnant, and Ben Sirah was born. So we see, and he was kasher. The lamdu chavruta says this man. אלא משכבת זרע של איש אחר כבדינן הבחנה, כי זה השם יסח אותו מאביו כדאיתא ביבומס. Says the smack, what's the problem? The problem isn't that she'll get pregnant. The child will be under kasher. The problem is that we don't have havchana. We don't have havchana. We have a concern that siblings will marry each other. So therefore, we can imagine that Rachel is married to Yaakov, and some oreach comes. Some they don't even know who the oreach is. And she lies on, she's tired, she lies down the sheets, ejaculates there, she gets pregnant. The child is kasher. However, he's now the sibling of whoever the orech's children are. And since it's a question of Shemisar Tachoto, that says the Isur. So here we see an interesting thing. We thought before that Avchana was only a case in which we have regular relations. And therefore, in the case of marriage, we mavdil that we should have kashrut in a marriage. Marriage should be kasher. Exactly, we said that it shouldn't be bnei buvia, that isn't exactly who he's having relations with. However, in a case in which it's miraculous that she get married, she get pregnant from the bedclothes. And if we have it, we said at the end of the day the child's kasher. It's not a psul on the child. The avchana, the din avchana doesn't posel the child. Aval, it's a chashash of Shem Yisach Adachato. That's like we saw in Rabbeinu in the Ribaz on the previous slide. And therefore, since it's a chashash kazeh, that chashash is kayam any time in which there's a case in which maybe we should get pregnant for someone else. So we'll say, if a child was born without supervision, is it posel the child? It's a good question. Sheila tova. Because we can say it wasn't intercourse, and we just saw that in the case in which Ben Sirah, the child was kasher. However, is that mutar lasot kacha? No. Why? Because we have a question of havchana. We don't know. We have a concern there. Shem Yisad Dachoto. That's the basis for supervision. Basic supervision is this bach that we saw that the din of havchana is not only a case of marriage. The din of havchana is a case in which any concern that a child will be born that we don't exactly know, that we, even if we know who he is, but that we are concerned that the possibility of the mistake being made and not having havchana between this child and that child. So the Sitz Eliezer in Chelek Tet in Siman Nun Aleph, which is the tshuva that every person's dealing with fertility, any person dealing with medicine halacha should know pretty much bal peh. So in that tshuva he says the following: Divrei Haggadah Smak Barur Malalu k'pedat avchana mikan hu mamash k'pedat avchana הנזכר ביבם השם אל שמסכים. דהיינו גזירה שם יסח אותו מאביו. It says the smak is, even though it's agadata, it's mamash the same din of avchana that we wouldn't allow people to get married with bet adin. The bet adin wouldn't give a heter to get married within 3 months. אותו דבר, לחוז בדיוק אותו דין פה. מפני שהרי מי אמר שתתאבר בכלל, סליחה, וזה שכתוב בלשון, קפדינן, why does it say kabdinan? We have a kabeda ma, it's not a isur. It's a we're makbid that it shouldn't. Why is it isur? Kavanato de pshuto mipnei sharei mi amar titaber bichlal b'ashek ala sadin shel ish acher. Why? Who says she's going to get pregnant? So we're makbid. It's a good hanaga. It's a good hakboda, but it's not a din. V'haz emetziud v'chokav v'nidirad mod, because it's not problem. It's not so clear she's going to get pregnant. So with the chashash that maybe chashash rachok she's going to get pregnant. So it's such a din. We don't have to be choshesh that that is a isur to demonstrate. It's a kapit. It's a good thing. Ad kedei digdeg ad kedei digdeg alazelashon kaptinan. Uleze ulamar beze dafilo achi kaptinan kamakara. Even though it's a matziut rechoka, you say, well, what's the chance of a couple having a mistake? How many mistakes are there a year? So there was a report in one of the British medical journals that they said that in a certain amount of years, maybe 2 or 3 years, they reported in England of 200 reported mistakes. So that's a lot, 200 reported mistakes. Okay, but look at how many cycles were done. Let's say it's 1% of the cycles, not even 1%, 1% of cycles. However, we know, of course, there's not a lot. There's not reported cases. So there's let's say we get to it's 1%. There's a shaila whether there was a mistake. And remember, a mistake that doesn't mean the child was born is not there. So there was a particular the alarm bells went off and the call is didn't. Okay, so let's say it's not 1%. Let's say it's 0.1%. It's 1 in 1,000. So in 1 in 1,000 we must. So what's the point? That it's still, you say, says the Sitz Eliezer, the chance of that woman getting pregnant by lying on the bed sheets is less than 1 in 1,000. It's 1 in 1,000,000, and still we have a hakbada. It's not a sore, but it's still hakbada. So Kal Vachomer would say here that it's not 1 in 1,000. It's not 1 in 1,000,000. It's 1 in 10,000. 1 in 1,000. וממשיך לבאר דמהו יסוד הקפדה, כי היכא דקפדין ההבחנה גזירה שמא יסח אותו מאביו. What's the chashash? The chashash is of the siblings marrying. והיינו דגם כאן, היא אותו יסוד קפדה שנזכר בחז"ל משום דילמה. דילמה תתאבא וישנה, אזי גזירה של שמא יסח אותו מאביו. It's exactly the same din as we have in Yevamos. There's the same din of the din of the smak is the same din as we saw in Yevamos. V'chazal non shiur v'lo gavlu gvul legezeratam shel. And Chazal didn't any gezerah. Let's imagine the same thing. We'll go back to the sheila we just had. We'll go back to the woman who's got avchana. We have a woman who gets married and she's 60 years old. Her husband died 2 months ago. She's 60 years old. No, there's no way she was pregnant. Says the Ribaz, it's not a Isur Doraita, but it's a Gezerah D'Rabbanan. Gezerah D'Rabbanan, but there's no Shiur like Gezerah Zot. So a person would have Avchana, even if it was impossible that she be pregnant. The husband would have been sick, and he was hospitalized for 6 months before he died. So we know there's no way that she could get pregnant. We would still have Avchana. So the din of Avchana is still a din, even though it's a Chashash Rachok. So the same thing, says the Sitz Eliezer, would be in this case as well. In the case that we have a Chashash Rachok, that a child was born not from theirs, still we'd have to say that we'd have that same Isur Kemo in the din of Yivamos. So that's the Tzad Echad, the din of Avchana, and the Avchana, and of not only of the Gemara says of the marrying after the first husband died or was divorced, but even in the case of the Rabbeinu Peretz of the concern of sleeping on another man's sheets. The Gemara Masechet Chulin says, Daf Yud Aleph Amud Bet, Ramaya Ma Atya Mi Makeh Aviv Imo, Demach Mana Katle. We have, if a person's Makeh Aviv Imo, is Chayav Mita. V'lichush Dilma Lav Aviv. How can we possibly put him to death? Maybe it's not his father. Maybe it's not his father. At the end of the day, there's always a chashash that is Makeh Aviv, and we say it's his father, and everybody comes as his father, but maybe his mother was unfaithful, maybe his mother was Mezaneh, and it's not his father. There's always a chashash, as the Gemara says. Why we go berov? Berov bilot achrei. We have a din musudar. The rov bilot achrei. Rov bilot achrei means that when the end of the day, if a husband and wife are living together normally, then we assume that he's the father, even if there's even a chashash on that. The Gemara says in Masechet Sotah, the Tani Rav Tachlifa Bar Marava Kamei Rav Abau, Isha Mazana Banei Ksherim. Even as a chashash, but the Isha Mazana the Banei Ksherim. Why? Rov bilot achrei. So we have a din of Rov bilot achrei, even if we have a good chance that he's not the father. Maybe the woman was Mezaneh. Doesn't matter. A couple are having relations. Rov bilot achrei. We could say, I was learning my Chavruta this recently, and we could say that the din is mod pashut, because at the end of the day, even though she was Mezaneh, she had relations with him probably more times than she had with the Mezaneh. She had more times than she had relations with him than with anybody else, and therefore Rov bilot bemet achrei. Rov bilot bemet it's his husband, so it's his child. So that's the horror. Yes, the Even Ezer Shulchan in Even Ezer Siman Daled says, "Eshet ish yetza alea kol she'ta mezaneh tachat ba'ala, v'kol meranin alechea, ein choshim lebanea shemei mamzerim, sherov bilot tolim beba'al, aval hi ba'atzma choshishim la mishum zonah." She can be a zonah. We can say she's asur bezonah. The Kohen choshesh la midin Torah, then the Kohen will be asur to marry her. However, we don't post limit yiladim. Why? So what gives? Maybe we say the same thing here. You told me there's a din of Avchana, but you can tell me what aval is a din of Gemara of Rov bilot achrei ba'al. What do you do here? So there are cases in which we don't say en Rov bilot achrei ba'al. Says Bnei Ahuva, letter he wrote to Rav Yonatan Eishitz, shekol שנדע, בבירור שאישה זו נתבעה משכבת זרעו של אדם זה בלבד, פשיטא שרב ובנו לכל דבר, ויהיה חייב על הכת אביו וכללתו. אלא מכיוון שלא ניתנה תורה למלאכי השרת, ואין עדים שיכולים להעיד שבוודאי הבלד זה הוא בנו של בעל הזרע, לא נוכל להרוג הבן הנולד על ידי עיבור באמבטי, על הכת אביו וכללתו. A person was born, a woman got pregnant near Bati. Who's the father? This guy. However, how do we know? If we don't have then a din of Rov bilot achrei ba'al, therefore it says we don't know. Therefore we don't lo magim oto because we have a safek. Ve'af ein lesmoch al ze l'inyan kiyum mitzvot priyovivya. Therefore the Bnei Ahuva says you can't somech that that's his father, his child, unless we know 100%. So if we have malachei sharet, we can see we have supervision. We had DNA testing, but we can see. But says the Bnei Ahuva that in the case in which we have a safek, even though it was nitabah bambati, there wasn't regular bia. Then we don't say Rov bilot achrei ba'al, even though we say the child is kasher. We said, as we said before, in the din of Rabbeinu Peretz, the child is kasher. However, we can't say that he's the father. That's why Agav, if Rabbi Sigerman we spoke to you, will tell you about in IUI and IVF, there are poskim that says, lo mekevim mitzvat pruvu, like we said here, and also that it's not so pashut that the child's medyaches achrei aviv. Why? Because once we separate out the zera from having relations, we don't have the din of Rabbi Lot achrei bal. That's the chor of the bnei uva, is what he's saying here. Says the Sefer Chinuch, mitzvah lamed hey, לא תנאף, משורשי מצווה רצה שיהיה זרע אנשים ידוע של מי הוא ולא יתערבו זה עם זה. That we should know who's who. And therefore says Rosh Shlomo Zalman, in Minchas Shlomo, יוצא שעלינו לעשות הכל על מנת למנוע חשש של עיבוב זרע, אף בטעות שלפי שיטתם אולי תחשב כניאוף. So the Chinuch says a whole different din. It's a din of niuf. The din of niuf is a case in which we don't know. We don't know who's who. We create a case situation. We actually saw at the beginning with Rashi that we don't know the Shidduch Ein Shora on some Mashu Mu'ubav. And therefore says Rosh Hashanah. So okay, so we don't know Mu'ubav. So Rosh Hashanah, therefore I have a Chuvah. What does the Chinuch teach us? Not enough? Of course not enough. But there's a Pashut, man. Atem Tamid Echamim Tzadikim Gemorim. V'dai not enough. But says Rosh Hashanah is another din we learn from here. The din of making every effort to make sure that there isn't a chashash, that there isn't a balagan. One of the Rabbanim said to me, Rabbi, we don't need to have supervision. I'll do DNA testing. The child will be born to do DNA testing. Okay, very nice. It's a good idea. So I said to him, what will happen when a child is born and it's not their child? Now we have a child who's not their child. What do you do? So he said, I never had a case like that. How many cases did you do? 3 cases in your whole lifetime. We do in Eretz Yisrael 10 cases of supervision a day. In America, we have every single day we have a supervision. So what you see in your lifetime once, we're going to see every month. So we can't say, well, yeah, but the Eved will make sure it's their child. No, we want to prevent it happening to begin with. That's what Shlomo Zalman says. So the Rav Ovadia says, "Aleim lakpid shelo yitchalef zaro shel baal bezera shel ish acher al yedei hashgacha miyuchedet." Therefore, we need to have hashgacha miyuchedet, not just the mirtat. The chash maybe will think that they're concerned. The mirtat helps us in a case in which we say that I think they're going to cheat if I'm not there. But if I want to make sure that there's avchana is not I'm going to cheat. There's no woman she's cheating or lying on the sheets. Or we don't say that there's a din of Rabbi Lot Acher Baal in a case in which no, there's a din acher legamay. We want to make sure we have hashgacha that we know who's who. Ki chalila v'chas latir kabbalat zer mi'ish acher v'lachen tzarich lashkiach be'ein hapekich al zeh. We need to have hashgacha, halachic hashgacha. The halachic hashgacha will make sure that we know that we can me'id to say that this child is the product of this husband. From the wife we know, we can see she gave birth to it. We can see that it's from her, that from this zera. Rav Elyoshiv Zatzal said to us that if even though I was working in a lab, you need to have hashgacha. Why? It's not a din of mirtat, it's a din of yediyah, it's a din of yichus. And therefore, the day that it's mirtat, so, I'll tell the doctor I'm doing DNA testing. I had a case in England recently that we don't have hashgacha. In a place where they didn't have hashgacha. And the guy was doing a particular procedure. And what will he do? So he went into the lab to be there present, but I said to him, tell them in addition that that you'll do DNA testing. You don't even have to do it, but it's mirtat. That's a good mirtat. Aval Rav Shlomo Zalman says it's not din of mirtat. It's a din of yediyah. Yuchsin is a din of that I know. I can say that I can come and say, give edus, exactly what we saw in Bnei Uva. That I can come and give edus that I know that this is the father. Therefore, he said, it's not the fact that you have a frum embryologist doesn't solve the problem. You have to have yediyah. Yediyah is only the woman. Who can give edus? We'll see in a moment. Only edus can be given by the chaya. So you can come and say, I was there and I saw it. That's what Rav Elyoshiv. Rav Eliyahu said that it's clear that in cases in which we mutzi, we have a chashash that we could maybe get someone in, we need to have hashgacha. Same with Rav Vosner. Rav Vosner didn't allow it until there was hashgacha. Rav Brandsdorf, all the other poskim, Rav Halberstam said to us, they were the head of the Eideh Haredit. So he said the Eideh Haredit is the best hashgacha for kashrus in the world. So how do you know? Because when the Saudi Arabian Beit HaMelucha wanted to have a kosher meal, they were marech, some Israeli dignitary, so they would for the best hashgacha. What was the best hashgacha? They kept the Eideh Haredit. So he said that's a proof that Eideh Haredit is accepted as being the best hashgacha. He said, that he said, for this inyan, you need better hashgacha than Eideh Haredit. Eideh Haredit wouldn't be enough for this. Because Eideh Haredit, you have a Yotze V'Nichnas, and you have a din, you have a Sud Mirta. So it's not fair. Here you need to have mamash, someone there 24 hours a day, the whole time. If she's not there, she has to lock it. It was very, very adamant that was at that. Rav Schechter also signed off on a letter a few years ago that said that it was definitely that we need to have hashgacha. That was very important. The Bavitcher Rebbe was an interesting case in which the Bavitcher Rebbe thought they weren't allowed to do supervision. You weren't allowed to do fertility treatment at all. Why? He said because it's under a musya. We have no idea who's who and what's going to happen, and it's going to create a big balagan in the world. And if you're allowed to do it, and then a few years ago there was a meeting between Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, and the Bavitcher Rebbe, few years before the Rebbe died, and one of the things they discussed was that they'll have Rav Eliyahu will give supervision for Pua. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave very clear instructions. It appears here in Asya, instructions exactly what should be the standard of hashgacha. It's a little bit more makbid in certain areas than other people are. And suddenly we got a call from one of the labs saying, we noticed that now there's a lot of Lubavitchers have fertility problems. So what happened? So he said, no, they always had fertility problems. They just never got a heter. Now that they have this hora from the Rebbe, they were able to get a heter. B'yachas is what he says there. B'yachas lepikuach alidei gun pua. Panu levakesh askama me'arebi b'bikor. Rabbi Shlomo Tzion Hagon Rav Mordechai Eliyahu etzel harebi. B'yom devav mar cheshvan tafshanu bet. לפי מיטב זיכרוני, התשובה של הרבי הייתה שבאים הראשון לציין הגאון רב מordechai אליהו לוקח על עצמו את האחריות, יש לסמוך עליו. So that's why a lot of Chabadnik will only samech on Pua. That was the only Irgun that was existing at the time, and the only one that the Rebbe ever gave hashgacha that he said he was allowed to. So we see that the din, l'chora, is that we need to have hashgacha, and hashgacha is yediyah, it's like yuchsin. What about if you have children who's born without supervision? If I have a person in my kila, Ken, Rabbi Aziz.
I just wanted to ask the question of, let's say during COVID, there were labs that didn't want supervisors in them. And a couple asks, do we go forward with treatment? And it's related, I think, to this next question. But
so what we did, we had a very big struggle during the pandemic in many ways. First of all, there were people in middle of treatment, suddenly they stopped it. And what we were able to do in some places was to put in at least the b'di'evet to put in a camera and have someone actually watching it mamash the whole time. It's b'di'evet. In places not, so then we said we at least should rely maybe on the days that it's mirtat, so they should say we can do DNA testing. What about if a child who was born? We have a child in the shul now. We have a shul. He's bar mitzvah, and he didn't have hashgacha. There was no hashgacha 13 years ago in the place where I was living. U'matam amul shtuki pasul, says the Gemara. Gezerah shema yisach oto me'aviv. Ela mi'ata, if that's the case, shtukit lo yisa, then a shtuki can't marry a shtukit. Shema yisach oto me'aviv. Kol kihani mezanu vazle. Why everybody's such a mezane? But shtukit lo yisa, shema yisach oto me'aviv. Ela lo shchicha. It's not so shchicha. Hachinami lo shchicha. Ela ma'alu asu b'yuchsin. So we could take this Gemara, we could discuss it for a long time. We don't have a lot of time to discuss it. We could discuss, is it mala asu b'yuchsin, therefore ein levatel et zeh, or mala asu b'yuchsin, therefore in a case in which bemed ein lanu brera, we still say that the child is kasher. So the ma'isa is that we would say that the child, the ma'isa is kasher. And maybe we have a new musag that Rav IVF achrei bal. The Rav Bilot achrei bal is a din that we say, oh, kanireh, he's the father. And if we have an IVF and he was in a lab and they put a zera, so we say Rav IVF achrei bal. It may be the same idea that we don't posel b'di'evet, and the ma'isa is that the batei din b'di'evet, a woman's going to come and say, my child's born from IVF, lo yifselu oto. Aval ze b'shela b'di'evet. We don't need to get to that shela b'di'evet if we have supervision. What about a woman? Maybe we should have a man. Rav Yaakov Ariel has to be. He says we're not somech on the hashgacha because the chorah it's a woman. So we have a din of ein echad neman b'isur and gemar geritin. V'aval it's devar shebe'erva. Maybe ein devar shebe'erva b'chol b'shnayim gemar yevamas. However, the din is from Kiddushin, the gemara of the Chaya. The Chaya nemen the Chaya says the gemara ze kohen v'ze levi v'ze nativ v'ze mamzer. Says the Gemara that the Chaya, the midwife, we somech alea to say who's a Kohen, who's a Levi, who's a Natin, who's a Mamzer, because she's there, she gave a din. Mashma that we see that in Yuchsin, that even though we're machmir with mala susha b'Yuchsin, however, since here we have a din that a woman's edus is mekubelet, and therefore we can say also here din and yuchsin that we're mekabel a woman as the ed, and she's basically acting, as we said, mamash like the chaya. She's acting as the midwife. The midwife is there. Why is the midwife believed? Because she was there in the birth. She saw it. She saw this came out from this woman, this came out from this woman, and she knows. She put on a red tie. She whatever it is. She was samech aleh, and therefore we say there's a kohen and this is a levi. And we have with not a din of birka kohanim is pashut. However, the din of we give truma, we'd give truma to the kohen who comes and says I'm a kohen. Why? Because the chayaz name in it. Why? She was there. So the chora, the same thing with the supervisor. Let's imagine a din. So I said to a lot of we try to explain to labs why do we need supervision? Why is it not enough that we have our own magic eye and we have our own tricks? I said let's imagine the following case: that there would be a chashash in X amount of time that there'd be a din of choshen mishpat. They come and say the law the parents died, and the other Yorshim would say this child is not the child of those parents. Why? Because it was born from IVF and it was a mix-up. Who knows? So we'd have to have someone to come into the Bet Din and say, I give Edus that this is their child. Who could give the Edus? The doctor can't give the Edus. Why? Because there's no Gebedavar. Of course he doesn't want to say I made a mistake. The child can't give Edus. The parents can't give Edus because they also weren't there. Who can give Edus? The only person who can give Edus is the supervisor. The supervisor was there. She was there. So we'd be somewhere on that as an aid. Tshuva is Ken. She'd be exactly the same din as the chaya. The same din as the chaya. The chaya we accept, in Yuchsin we accept her. So the chor would be okay. That's a very nice construct. Rav Eliel didn't accept that. He thought it wasn't, they didn't think that was a good comparison. Therefore says, however, you can say maybe we don't need to have a dude here on such a high level. We need to have maybe go back to the din of mirta. To go back to the din of mirta, then it's enough. Mirta is enough. It's a man or a woman. So then din of edus. If we say it's a din of edus, then lechora, so we get into the sheila, and we have to say that she's like the name. Let's talk a little bit about some complicated issues, a little bit like Rabbi Aziz mentioned. Question: can we have a yotzev and nichnas? So we just said that Rav Halberstam thought that wasn't a good hashkacha. It needed to be 100% hashkacha. And therefore it needs to be there. Questions: can we say that there's video supervision? So we're not there. There are certain places there we have video. Does it create a yediyah? Is it possible to fake it? So that's the Maisa is we don't generally and everybody's watching surveillance cameras will know that it's not so easy to it's not so difficult to fake them and to bluff them, to blur them, those sorts of pashut. So if we get the question of whether we have a question of mirta, look up pashut. Question says there yediyah. In Eretz Yisrael, we're very, very makpid to make sure as much as possible to have one hashkacha for two reasons. First of all, because once we have two, the doctors say I throw everybody out. I can't have three different people giving hashkacha. It becomes too complicated. The second thing is that we didn't want to get to a case in which you say that one kid's more kosher than another kid. You're a pua hashkacha, you're a rabbanut hashkacha, you're a badatz hashkacha. It's too, we don't want to get to that situation. And therefore, it should be that we have one standard. Machon pua is greater than one standard. And even though other people are doing supervision, I think generally pua is considered to be the standard way of doing supervision. And that's we should make sure, therefore, that the hashkacha is accepted by everybody. Is there a case of half supervision? So let's say a couple said we froze sperm we had a case recently, we froze sperm in California, let's say, and we're doing a treatment in Chicago. So I want to move the sperm from here to here, but the sperm was frozen without hashkacha. So, or the couple have embryos that they froze in America, and now they come and use it in Israel. So we generally do not like that. I think it's not a good policy that we should say that there's hashkacha. However, I'll tell you, because we've been a little bit honest here, that there are cases in which you do use it. Let's imagine the following. We have a guy, we just said the guy froze sperm, but he's now had cancer treatment and doesn't have any sperm. He's left without any sperm. So I'm not going to now penalize him because he used hashkacha. So we'll have a way, we get him to sign a waiver. They sign a waiver saying that we know the hashkacha for pua started from this point and not from before. The other thing, there was a case, there's a concern in the past, maybe there's genetic material inside the medium, that you saw from Rabbi Siegman spoke last time about this medium that's used to develop the embryo inside the lab, and is that they have genetic material. So that was in the past, it was, and generally today it's not. It's called synthetic. Some say that we should look at the medium through a microscope. Generally, that's not the way Pur does it. But if someone requests it, the horror, yes. What stages need supervision? So we have all stages of anything when sperm is frozen, egg is frozen, embryo is frozen. Because people say, I had a couple that said, yeah, we did a sperm retrieval and we didn't do hashgacha because there was no eggs. There was no. You need to have. If you're freezing the sperm, you're going to use the sperm to a treatment, or you're going to freeze it. You need to have hashgacha. People forget that because that's when we get into those questions of hashgacha. What happens? Someone forgot to do hashgacha for the egg sperm freeze, or a woman's coming to egg freezing and she doesn't do hashgacha, and then now long, but later, 10 years later, when she needs to use the eggs, they weren't frozen with hashgacha. So it's important to remember that, not only for the IVF. What stage do you put supervision? So for IUI, the sperm collection, the centrifuge, the insemination, all needs hashgacha. IVF, the sperm collection, the egg retrieval, incubation, embryo transfer, cryopreservation, all of that needs hashgacha. So not do hashgacha only for the supervision, for the civilization. It needs to be the whole thing. Needs to be supervised. It's important to tell the couple that for the earlier that you let us know, the more we're able to set it up. People say, I'm at the lab. Can you say hashgacha? No, I can't tell you from now to now. If you told me yesterday, I would have consulted you. And generally, it's from a day or two before, but you don't know very much before. But if we're doing a treatment in which we're not using the sperm, let's say we're doing just a semen analysis, you don't have hashgacha. Why? Because they don't use it. They take it, they throw it away. Sperm is a very cheap commodity. So they take it and throw away. 100% I know that's the case. Then we don't have hashgacha. Therefore, since it's discarded, we don't need it. However, if it's going to be frozen, if we're having a semen analysis which is going to be frozen because we're using it, or we may use it, or there's a chashash we're going to use it, or there's a possibility that we can use it, then we need to have hashgacha. Then we need hashgacha. And Baruch Hashem, Pua has supervision literally all over the world. We have in Israel, we have in Europe, we have it in Australia, South Africa, in Russia, throughout North America, Canada, South America. We're now setting up a branch. The two Talmidei Chachamim set up a branch in Mexico, and they have hashgacha all in Argentina. We've done in Peru and other places. So Baruch Hashem, there's no one to say we didn't. There's no hashgacha in my place. Baruch Hashem, there's hashgacha. And we've also sent mashgichot around the world, around to other places as well on a sporadic basis. The Seder. So I don't see so many people. I hope that the blank screens are hiding real people. How do we know? Maybe they just now everybody's putting that up as a picture. They just put, I don't know. Tov, Shailot, a lot of information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you need hashgacha, you can get it arranged. Fall up Pua. Rabbi Sigan will give you all of the details, and it's important to let people know in good time, because we say a couple comes and said, we did the egg freezing, or we did the IVF. We're going to have the transfer tomorrow. Can we have hashgacha? That's already too late. We should, this should be a dibur when people come to speak to the beginning. You remember you need hashgacha. People call you and they just have a question about semen analysis. Remember, tell them when you come to do IVF, IUI, don't forget to hold hashgacha in good time. Shalom, shalom, b'sorot tovot, kol tov, shalom, shalom.